Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the podcast titled When Wildfire Comes. My name is Dr. Christopher Potter, and I'm a wildfire scientist with over 30 years of experience working with NASA, our space agency, and with local communities impacted by wildland fires. I've studied these fires on the urban interface using satellite imagery and ground measurements uh, for all the most destructive fires in the Western United States over the last couple decades, and have published dozens of science papers on these events. And I myself live in a high risk wildfire zone in Northern California. So today we're going to hear from our invited guest about their close encounter with a major wildland fire that occurred during the past several years. This is not a breaking news report by any means, but rather another case study episode in this podcast series, during which our guest will recount their reactions, some of their emotions, perhaps, and their firsthand observations, certainly, of the wildfire approaching and burning in their town or community. And then, of course, at the end, the lessons to be learned from such a horrifying event when it approaches a populated area. So today, I'm very pleased and honored to welcome our very special guest. It is Battalion Chief from CALFIRE Sean Jerry. He is the chief of Battalion 1412 of the Sonoma Lake and Napa unit of CALFIRE. And today we're going to focus in on the glass fire. So I'll give you, just before I introduce or turn it over to Chief Jerry, I'm going to just describe a little bit about the glass fire for background. It was a fire that started in September of 2020. That was a big fire season from essentially an undetermined cause, and it burned for 23 days before it was contained. After burning over 67,000 acres and destroying over 1,500 structures, including 308 homes and 343 commercial buildings in Napa County. It also destroyed 334 homes in Sonoma County. Fortunately, there were no deaths reported as a result of the fire, but an estimated 70,000 people were evacuated from the Sonoma and Napa County area before the orders were lifted on October 19th of 2020. So it was a big fire, and it destroyed a lot of structures. It's on everyone's list of top most destructive fires in California, recent history. So with that, I'm going to let Chief Jerry tell our listeners about who he is, and then maybe you can follow up with that with some of your feelings about that day or the days you were working on the glass fire, and the things that happened, in sequence from beginning to end. So, turning it over to you, Chief.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on, Chris. So my background with the fire service, I have 27 years with CAL FIRE, all the way through the ranks of firefighter, engineer, captain to battalion chief. Now I currently have Battalion 1412, like you said, which is the southern portion of Sonoma County. I grew up in Sonoma County, in the town of Sonoma, and lived here my whole life. Multiple positions through the department over my years that I've worked, including the helicopter program, the air attack program, the camp program. Served on an incident management team for CAL FIRE now for 5 years. Our team actually took the glass fire over, I think, on the second or third day of that incident, and that's what brought me to the glass fire. But yeah, currently holding the position of battalion chief for the southern part of Sonoma County here. Glen Ellen, Petaluma stations is what I cover. And I'll go into a little bit of the glass fire if you wanted to start with the next
Yeah,
question.
yeah, sure. I mean, yeah, we can just go to to if you could take, take 10 minutes or more if you like, and if you could just recount the events on the day that the fire started, maybe first, and then on those days in particular when it burned the most structures, I guess, and how what you were seeing and reacting to at the time of those days.
Perfect. Yeah, the first day it started, I was actually off duty. We just came off, our team just came off of the Mendocino complex that was burning through, I believe it was 4 counties up in Mendocino, basically through Mendocino up into Humboldt, Tehama Glen area. So we ended up having 2 days down after I think a 20-day stint up on that incident. So I was home the day that the fire actually broke or started over in Napa County. Just trying to catch up at home and do some things at home because I knew most likely we were going to get activated again and be going somewhere again. It was a busy summer. Fires had been going almost through the whole summer. We had the lightning complex come through before the glass fire actually broke. And when the glass fire started, I remember we had a pretty substantial wind blowing through Napa, Sonoma counties. And, everyone at that point, when you have a wind like that, everyone's kind of on edge anyways.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to catch a fire. Just depends on where it's at. So the second day of the fire is when we activated into it with the team. And I got in my pickup, took off towards the incident, just trying to get like a situational awareness of what was going on, where the fire was at. When I got onto the incident, for the team, I'm my position on the team is an operations branch director, which means I'll have a large geographical scale of the fire, like a large footprint is what I'm in command of on the incident. So when I got on scene of the glass fire, I remember they gave me a branch, and it basically stretched from the Napa Sonoma County line up through Sugarloaf State Park, just out of Kenwood, and wrapped back around into the community of Oakmont, going towards the Rincon Valley, Santa Rosa area.
Mm-hmm.
When I got on the fire was still somewhat stuck up on the hill, being wind driven, pushing down into like the communities of Oakmont and Kenwood itself. That was my section of the fire. My first thoughts, I tied in with the guy, and that was already running that Chief Van Warmer at the time. Kind of got accountability, what the fire was doing, where it's at, what actions have been taken so far, and kind of where our holding lines were. But my first thoughts going is like where we're going to stop that fire, what's kind of the lines in the sand, and the safety of my personnel, the accountability for my personnel, where they're at, that I'm going to take that, working within that section of the line, that I'm going to take over, and safety of the community. Do we have all evacuations taking place? Are there still people within, still populating within front of this fire? Mm-hmm. What actions we're going to take on that. So the first day was kind of getting orientated with it, and getting people to work on the fire, coming up with control lines and contingency lines where we're going to hold this. If it doesn't hold here, what's our bump back? And what are we going to do to stop this thing and, save as many structures as you can, but make sure almost 100% that the population, the civilian population's out of the way of this thing. When you get a fire going like that in the winds, it's pretty hard to stop. We saw it within the Tubbs and the Nuns fire, that just the ember cast and everything else, and the spot fires over your line. It's hard to stop that in place. It just makes it so your efforts almost seem like they're not working as much. So, I drove up into the top of Sugarloaf State Park, got a good look at the fire that day, and started coming up with a game plan. I had a couple other of the guys off the team up there. Sean Norman, he was an operations sections chief on the team, and we kind of put our heads together because we both grew up in this area. We've seen the fires in the past, and we started thinking about, okay, where's the game plan to hold this thing and keep it out of as many structures as we possibly can. So once we came up in with a game plan on that and started getting all the resources into place, I started looking at some contingency line and things like that behind that, just in case that plan didn't work. What we're going to do to slow this thing down and stop it. And the Napa County side was still going pretty good, just because the wind component over here. Sonoma County side, the winds, it was a little bit blocked by the winds, but still pushing over onto this side pretty good.
And what direction were the winds coming from?
They were coming from the northeast, the typical Diablo wind, they call them up here. Down south, they call them the Santa Anas up here. Mm-hmm. They're known as the Diablo winds. And, usually we'll get gusts from 30 to 50 coming through, and, relative humidity drops, everything like that. So it's like, I don't know, you'd almost call it the perfect firestorm. And they were occurring quite frequently there for a little while with the Nuns and the Tubbs and the Glass, and we've lucked out and escaped it for the last couple years, and with some early rains and things like that, it's kind of saved us, at least for Northern California, on the large scale wind event fires.
Yeah. Yeah. So then when
basically we held it on Highway 12, just east of Highway 12 through the community of Oakmont, things like that. And we had a few areas where the fire had spotted over or slopped over. And we ended up picking those up at about 15 to 20 acres. And they were, if we wouldn't have picked those fires up, they would have kept burning south towards the community of Sonoma. But we were lucky enough to have resources right in place at the right time, and they just jumped on it right off the bat. So, hats off to those guys for being there at that moment and picking those slopovers up. Yeah. I think that's it on that question, just coming into the fire.
Yeah, coming into the fire. And then on the days when many structures were burned, what was your recollection of the type of structures that were lost? I mean, and their place in the community. Were they in densely developed areas, or were they in more open space areas?
So the structures lost that I dealt with were mostly in like sparse areas, up Adobe Road, some through Kenwood and Oakmont areas. a little bit in Rincon Valley. Most of the areas that we lost the structures were in like deep canyon areas. Not a whole lot of defensible space, and just real tight roads, everything like that. So hard to get crews in there when the fire's coming down the hill at you, especially with the wind. The wind funnels through the canyons even harder. So some of those engine companies and firefighters in those areas actually had to pull back a few times, just for their own safety. And then once the fire went through, get back in there and start fighting fire again. But most of it was up in the hills where we lost the structures, and then at the base of the hills where we lost the structures before it hit the valley floor. And with the dense growth up there, with the vegetation and the forested areas, things like that, it's the intensity of the fire coming down the hill was significant enough to where for your own safety, sometimes you have to pull back and pull out of those areas, just to not get anyone hurt. But yeah, that was most of the structures we had. We saved quite a few of them through some of the neighborhoods on the base of the hills before the flats. We ended up taking bulldozers and just running them almost through people's backyards, just above their backyards, and just creating a huge defensible line right there, with some firing operations that we were doing, just backfire into the main fire, and that ended up holding the fire in place. It was a little protected from the wind that was happening, so it ended up holding that in place and allowing us to get in there, set up on the structures, and kind of draw that line in the sand of here's our holding spot, and let's keep it here and keep it out of the communities.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, that's a bulldozer through your backyard. That's something to see after the fact, I guess. But at least your house is still there.
Yeah, and we obviously trying to do the least amount of damage as possible to people's properties, but sometimes, if that's the last offense, I would hope that they would understand.
Yeah, of course, yeah. So in Sonoma County, it wasn't the situation like it was with the Tubbs fire where whole neighborhoods burned up from this fire.
Yeah, there wasn't. The Tubbs fire was a little bit different. That went into like the residential areas, Santa Rosa, Mark West Springs, where it was almost like a tract home community. This is more of a sparse area, like larger lots, farmlands, vineyard, things like that. So it's a little bit more of a spread out community compared to the fires you see, like the Tubbs fire in Rincon Valley, Santa Rosa area, or like Southern California, where it's house to house and the flame fronts are just coming into that. It actually, on the firefighter perspective, it makes it a little more difficult because it's so spread out, and you're having to search for some of the structures and come up with a different game plan, to where if the houses are back to back, it's almost like here's your line and here's where you're going to stop it.
Right.
So it makes it a little more difficult, I guess, in the rural aspect. But yeah,
yeah. Well, then that's Sonoma County. I guess the glass fire is also pretty famous for um, destroying some vineyards and some wineries in Napa Valley. Isn't that right?
Yeah, I believe so. And it did hit some vineyard and stuff in Sonoma County. And the way I look at vineyards is, they're actually a pretty significant fuel break through the vegetated hillsides and things like that. So a lot of times we'll use some of that vineyard as you know some of our actual control line, as long as they're disked and things like that, and they do have the fuel break between them. But we'll do like a dot to dot from vineyard to vineyard, just trying to hold the fire in place. It makes a pretty significant fuel break already in place for us, I should say.
Hmm.
Um, so we take advantage of that when we have that opportunity a lot.
Yeah, that's makes perfect sense that you've got some open space to work in. And were you observing a lot of embers being blown into and around structures? And when they did land, um, how did the fire behave? Was it actually carried into grassy areas, or was it impacting structures and getting inside right away, the ember?
Yeah, a lot of ember cast from these fires just because of the fuel loading. The more fuel that you have in there with the wind on it and everything, you're going to get a lot of ember cast. We were getting it between structures, and some of the vacant open lots. Um, so while I have engines on structure defense parked at that house, I have other engines kind of free floating around a little bit, and picking up those spot fires from the ember cast before they take off and continue to run. Um,
Hmm.
we were getting a pretty significant amount of that, especially when we get the larger wind gusts. And then it did jump the road in a few areas. They were able to pick that up. It did jump the road, or jumped Highway 12 in the Rincon Valley area. I didn't have that branch, but I remember it did jump Highway 12 in the Rincon Valley area, and it went up into Annandale State Park, just above the community of Oakmont. And crews were able to get in there and hold that fire before it got all the way into the park. Luckily, they were able to hold that. But the ember cast is probably one of the biggest issues that we have with structure defense. I've seen it before, to where if the fire's gone through, everything's looking good on a structure, and it's all black around the structure already. The structure stood.
Hmm.
Um, an hour later, you come back and it's going again. The actual structure is going again, just because like and some of that ember cast went through the eave vents or something like that, and it took a few minutes to start going again. And now you have a house fire in the middle of it that you thought it was good, but it kicked back up on you. Um,
Yeah, yeah. Once some ember like that gets up under the vent, um, hard to stop it, I suppose, because it's in a closed space, even for the homeowner, right? Well, the homeowner's evacuated probably, but
yeah,
then
most
what do you
likely the
do?
homeowner, they'll be evacuated, but then you not now you have a house fire in front of a different fire that you're or in the middle of a different wildland fire that you're still chasing and trying to hold. Um,
Yeah. And are
and
the are the wildland crews um, also then turning their attention to those structures at that point, or is there more of a urban firefighting um, team coming in to try to put out the structures?
Yeah, so CAL FIRE, we're all risk, so we do structure and the wildland. So once we do have a house on fire like that, we'll do everything that we can to stop that, and we'll put as many crews as we have available on that house to stop it.
Hmm.
And the priority is still the head of that fire, because it's still going to be threatening more structures and doing things like that. But we will fall back on that house and do what we can to put that out.
Hmm. Yeah. Uh, that's not, that's what I would think you do too. Yeah. Wow. This is a great recounting, although I'm sure that there are many other events and incidents that stick in your mind. But is there one moment or one time period during the fire where you felt okay? this is the turning point. We've got it under control because we did this, this, and this.
Yeah, I think, once you start that first 24, 48 hours, maybe a little bit longer sometimes, is probably the hectic part of the fires for us. You're still getting everything organized. The fire's still running on you
Mm-hmm.
significantly. Um, and it's the reflex time as well to place the order for resources, their travel time to the incident. A lot of the times, we have the guys out there. We'll do 48 hours straight before they get some sleep. If we don't have
Mm-hmm.
the resources, stuff like that. So it takes a lot for that to catch up and trickle in. And once base camp and everything's set up on a significant incident, then you start catching up. The first 24 hours, 48 hours is the hectic part of it, and
Mm-hmm.
this one with the wind, we did have significant resources, but with the wind, it's just constantly pushing and you're constantly chasing the fire. But once the winds kind of die down is when you start to get a grasp at it. And I think, on the Sonoma County side, we still had a significant wind, but we were a little bit protected from the Mayacamas mountain range.
Mm-hmm.
So it slowed the fire down compared to the Napa County side. It slowed the fire down considerably, and that's when we're able to get in there and start drawing our lines and coming up with the game plan of it. And it's always I would take every resource in California if I can get it at that moment, but like
Uh-huh.
that doesn't work out that way a lot because there's usually other fires going, and you need to keep some resources back for new starts and things like that. But once you start getting your resources and the things that you need in your toolbox, I guess you could say, to start fighting that fire and putting the hard work in, then that's when the turning point happens. And the winds usually they'll last 2 to 3 days, maybe 4 days sometimes. And once the winds start to subside, is when you really start making your attack on it and
Yeah.
making that game plan go into play and putting your control lines in place. And um, you know
Yeah.
more resources is better. We sometimes don't get it with the amount of fires we get in California. You can't 100% take away all the resources from one incident to send them to another. So you kind of have to play that shuffling game with resources sometimes. So with the aircraft, the pilots usually look at that. I believe it's 30 miles an hour. The winds, they start shutting down the aircraft.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so for some of it, I can't 100% recall the aircraft, but
Mm-hmm.
most likely for parts of the fire, the aircraft were shut down at times. Um, it starts becoming ineffective for some of that stuff. Um,
Yeah.
with the retardant drops and things like that, like we have some of the most amazing pilots in the world, and the things I've seen them do, I for sure wouldn't want to do. Uh, but like they're usually spot on with their retardant drops in the canyons that they get into, and the helicopter pilots, you know, uh, years of service, years of training, and some of the most remarkable guys I've seen. But with the winds and the turbulence from the fire and things like that, uh, it's almost not effective anymore. The
Right.
retardant trickling down onto the fire with a 30, 40 mile an hour wind, that retardant's caught within the wind and then it pushes it on the other side of the hill. Um, and it's for their own safety as well. They'll shut down. The last thing you want to see is an aircraft accident. So, you know,
Right.
uh, if a pilot's not comfortable with it anymore, they're just not going to go up.
Of course.
We see that on a lot of these Santa Ana fires in Southern California, the Northern California fires with the wind-driven fires, the aircraft. It comes to a certain point, they're not effective anymore, and it's just risk versus gain at that point, and the pilots are going to shut it down, and it becomes too dangerous for them. There's no point in risking more lives over something like that.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. Great. Well, just one other question at this juncture in the episode. Maybe you could tell us what you think some of the lessons that we should all take away from this type of wildland fire, the kind that is very wind driven, and then you start to see towns or villages, developed areas being threatened. Are there some general lessons you tell people about that they should start to prepare in a different way than they did before?
Yeah, we've always with CAL FIRE, we've always preached like the ready, set, go. Like have a game plan with your family. Have bags already packed, ready to go. When most everyone watches the weather, if the winds are coming like that, just be on the preparedness that there's most likely we're going to catch a fire. Defensible space is another thing around the structures. We preach 100 feet of defensible space around your structure, removing the flammable vegetation, everything like that. If you have the chance, go farther than 100 feet. And before the chaos starts, if you know a fire has broken, try to leave the area before that. It helps us out. It helps with the evacuations. We're trying to fight the fire, and if everyone's already out of there, that's one less thing off of us that we have to worry about. Now we're only worried about your house, and traffic's not as bad. We can get the fire resources into that area without people coming back out of it during the evacuations. Mm-hmm. Obviously, sometimes that happens, right off the initial start of the fire. Everyone's evacuating. We're trying to get in, so it's a little bit of a traffic jam in some of these tighter communities. But if you have all that stuff in place already, then you're set to go, and you're out of the fire danger zone, I would say, and you're letting us just do our job. But the defensible space is a big thing, and having a game plan with the family, and a place to go. Family members out of the community to stay with, something like that. But yeah, that's one of the big things of just making sure that everyone's out of danger's way, and the base plays a huge part on it. I've seen structures standing that have beautiful defensible space, and the ones next to it, they didn't have that vegetation clearance like they should have. And not from the glass fire, but the Nuns fire, I remember talking to one of the guys in Glen Ellen, one of the community members in Glen Ellen, and he actually told me, he goes, I spend about $25,000 a year with weed clearing, tree trimming, and he had a pretty good property. He had like 10 acres, and that's what he was spending. But he goes, it's a little bit of a hit in the pocket, to do all this work to be ready for a fire. But he goes, we evacuated during the Nuns, and we thought our house was gone. And he says, we came back and it was still there. And, he says, I'll keep spending that money because nothing could replace my house and, my photographs and my memories and everything like that. So a little bit of pre-work from the community goes a long way with the defensible space. And
Yeah.
we've also started, within the communities around here, doing pretty significant prescribed burning through the communities, and
Right.
and that is a huge uh, fuel. It reduces the fuel loading in areas that we're looking at. If we do get those large fires again, we've done some fuel thinning and prescribed burning through these areas. Here's another line that we can hold the fire. Intensity is going to drop once it hits those areas that we've already pre-treated with prescribed burns or fuels reductions through those areas.
Yeah. Yeah. We're seeing everywhere in Northern California more prescribed burns from I guess this is about the time when we, that CALFIRE and other agencies prepare for them, and then they carry them out when the weather's nice and cool and calm, right? Or
Yeah, I
in
think
the
over
winter months.
the last week I've been involved with 4 different prescribed burns over the last week, and when we luckily we got rain today, a significant amount of it, but when we have that window to do those prescribed burns, the fuel loading's reduced. It's actually good for the environment. It takes it back to what it was, and
Hmm.
for the next, it's low intensity, so it's not killing all the trees. It's not harming much, but it's getting rid of those ground fuels and those ladder fuels for those. When we do have a start in there, it's harder to contain, harder to control those fires compared to an area that we have burned through and reduced the fuel loading to where we could pick that up real quick and put it out. And the ember cast from those fires that we've uh, the ember cast from the fires in the areas that we haven't done any fuels treatment is significant compared to the ember cast where we have done the reduced fuel loading and conducted the prescribed burning through. So, you see a fire go through an area that we've already 2 years ago, a year ago, uh, conducted that prescribed burn through it. Like the ember cast and the fire intensity is just not there. It drops it significantly.
Yeah, that's great. That's a really important um, lesson to have learned, and that is also something that the county can take on, or the local community, as a larger effort, take some of the burden off the individual homeowners, um, and it becomes a real whole countywide effort to do it. So,
Yes.
well,
Yep.
yeah. Well, Chief Jerry, thank you so much. I think we've really covered some amazing insights. Thank you for sharing them and your experience and knowledge with our listeners today. Um, I'll just say this recording was made, and the other one that will be made for this podcast. It's being made to document some of these very important wildfire impacts and the lessons learned, particularly around the urban zones in California, that are vulnerable um, to the fires approaching from the wildlands. We want to capture that kind of and document it in this way before that knowledge is lost, from the collective memory of those who were there to experience them. It's already been 4 years, and I'm sure that things are very sharp in your mind in some ways, and in other ways, it can go away quickly. So, want to capture it when we can. So again, thank
Absolutely.
you. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule. Um,
Thank you for the invite of having me on the show.
sure, no, you've been a great guest. Maybe we can talk again sometime about another fire, either past, hopefully not future, but of course there will be another one.
Yeah.
Um, and I wish you and all the firefighters there, yeah, safety and success in all the future incidents which you're called into.
Thank you.
So thanks again. So listener, that wraps up another episode of When Wildfire Comes. So please tell your friends about us and check back regularly for new editions. So goodbye, have a great day, and be fire safe.